The Ben Simmons saga is over for now. What's up? My name is Tucker. Thank you for clicking on the video. I really appreciate it. So we've gotten some reports this week from The Athletic saying that the Sixers are moving towards keeping Ben Simmons through the offseason rather than pushing a trade through this season in the hopes that they're going to get either James Harden or another star. This is significant for a variety of reasons. Not only does it mean that Simmons is unlikely to play for the team this season, it impacts their ability to contend for a title this season and adds another crazy domino to what's going to be a really interesting 2022 offseason. And the biggest issue for Philly in terms of not making a move right now is just value versus timing. They would rather have Bradley Beal, Damian Lillard, Jaylen Brown, a player of that caliber in exchange for Ben Simmons, and that's just unrealistic at the moment. And in terms of getting that value, yeah, probably makes sense to wait until the offseason to deal Ben Simmons, because even with all of his flaws, even with him quitting on the team, requesting a trade, not being around the team, his flaws on the court, his inability to space, his questionable fit alongside other really good players, he's still an all-star caliber player, signed long-term, he's still young. There's an incredible amount of value there, and the Sixers should be looking to get an all-star caliber player back. So absolutely, in a vacuum, they should not be willing to accept less than that. And probably none of the offers that they've been getting from other teams are close to the value that Simmons actually provides in a normal circumstance. The problem with that is this NBA season is not occurring in a vacuum, which brings us to the timing aspect of this, because Joel Embiid right now is worst case one of the 8 best players in the entire league. He's an incredibly dominant post player. He fits well alongside pretty much anyone because of his ability to space. He can work on the perimeter. He's one of the best defensive players in the league as well. He's playing at an MVP level right now, and not having Simmons and or value in exchange for him is a massive deterrent towards the Sixers trying to be championship contenders this season. And the reason that's an even bigger issue is because Embiid also turns 28 in March. He's 7 foot, 280 pounds. He plays over 30 minutes a night with one of the most physical play styles in the league, has a history of knee and foot injuries, and is having a legit MVP caliber season right now. It's realistic to think that what's happening with Joel Embiid right now, where he is legitimately one of the best players in the league, will never happen again for the rest of his career, whether that be due to injuries, whether that be for a variety of different reasons. This could be the best year you ever get out of Joel Embiid, and you're planning to waste it by not trading Ben Simmons. That might seem unrealistic, that might seem overly dramatic, but we have years and years and years of evidence that big guys fall off a cliff way faster and way earlier in their careers than guards do, especially players like Embiid that have a history of lower leg injuries. Big guys, especially the most dominant ones physically, can be gone like that. So while theoretically waiting around to trade Simmons and getting maximum value out of him in the offseason does make sense, you're basically throwing away the entire season this year, which is why this entire time I always expected Simmons to get moved by the deadline in exchange for some kind of package that helps Philly this year. But right now, that seems very unrealistic. And it's opened up all these different possibilities. Like I said, there's a scenario where this era of Sixers basketball that they worked so hard for through the process, through all these different draft picks, they finally got to a position where they can be a contender. It might just be over if Embiid falls off and they wait too long to get value for Simmons. While on the other hand, if this isn't the last great Embiid season that we get, and he continues to be awesome for the next couple of seasons, and you don't get good value out of Simmons, you may have handcuffed yourself from being a contender there as well, which speaks to the incredible difficulty of this situation. And so the real problem here is, if you're Philadelphia, you have to make some kind of assumption, some kind of educated guess somewhere. You have to assume that either Joel Embiid is going to continue to be this level of player for the next couple of years, and he is going to be a historical anomaly in terms of a big guy that plays a dominant physical play style and continues to play at this fantastic level despite injury concerns in the past. Or you have to assume that you're going to get really good value out of Simmons in the offseason, whether that be Harden, Jaylen Brown, Bradley Beal, Damian Lillard, whatever the case may be. And you also, in that scenario, have to assume that getting that value in exchange for Simmons makes you the championship contender that you're hoping to be with Embiid still healthy. Now, the real issue here is the situation that Simmons put Philadelphia in the first place, because even if the fit was never perfect, and even if there were always going to be issues between Embiid and Simmons on or off the floor, they were a great basketball team. Defensively, they had everything they needed to be absolutely suffocating in the postseason against any offensive team. Yes, maybe they fell below expectations at times because they had struggles late in games or they weren't potent enough offensively, but there were things that you could fix. And from the moment that Simmons started to fall apart in the playoffs and then requested a trade, everything started to fall apart for Philadelphia, and that is what has led us to where we are right now. Make no mistake about it, this is on Ben Simmons. Now, were there issues with the way that Doc Rivers and Joel Embiid and other members of the Sixers organization handled that playoff loss to Atlanta, and could that have led to a large majority of what is happening right now? Absolutely. But ultimately, Simmons' reaction to that situation is what has led Philly to where they are now. Nobody handled it perfectly, but Simmons is the only one that wanted to split it up. He's the only one that did not want to be in Philadelphia anymore. And in turn, along with the way that he's handled the situation since, turned the city against him and turned the team against him. But as an NBA front office, you have to deal with the cards that you're dealt. And I think Philly's kind of screwing this up right now. Obviously, we have no idea of knowing what trades have actually been on the table or what haven't, but it's clear that at no point has the deal for Ben Simmons even been remotely close in terms of the asking price for Philadelphia compared to what other teams are willing to give up to get him. And that could end up being a massive mistake. Because let's say you wait until the offseason. Let's say that your goal is to get Harden, Beal, Lillard, Brown, one of those guys. And let's just say that James Harden re-signs with Brooklyn and Portland keeps Damian Lillard. Bradley Beal re-signs with Washington. Jaylen Brown is not ready to leave Boston. What do you do then? What if the market that you're looking at for Ben Simmons right now is exactly what the market is this offseason? And then you're sitting there, you're a year removed from the Ben Simmons trade request. You still haven't moved him. His value has continued to decrease. He's a year further into the contract. He's a year older. He's a year removed from playing basketball games. And his value is even lower than it was then, and you're in the exact same situation, and you've thrown away the opportunity to chase a title or at least a finals appearance in an Eastern Conference that appears to be relatively wide open. And that goes back to the assumption thing I was talking about earlier. You have to assume something. That's the situation that Simmons has put the Sixers in. You have to assume that there's going to be a market, or you have to assume that Embiid's going to be healthy. All these different factors come into play, and I'm not convinced that this is going to work out for them in even the slightest. Here's potentially the biggest point, because the guy that continues to get brought up in all these rumors and all this news is James Harden. Are we sure you want James Harden in exchange for Ben Simmons this offseason? Let's say right now, if you're Philly, you could guarantee that you could do a straight up Harden for Simmons swap in the offseason. Harden wants to go somewhere else. He wants to be with Daryl Morey. He wants to be the main guy again on the perimeter. He gets to play alongside Joel Embiid. Are you sure that that's the best idea in exchange for Ben Simmons? I have watched a lot of James Harden this season, and I enjoy having him on my basketball team. He's incredibly talented. He can put up 37, 10, and 12 on any given night, and it's great to watch. But the inconsistencies are there. He's not in great shape. He's not Houston MVP level James Harden anymore. He's not that guy. And if you bring him in a sign and trade, you're going to be signing a 32-year-old James Harden to what is probably going to be a 4 or 5 year max contract on a guy that has taken the most punishment in the league over the last 10 years, has played a ton of minutes, gets to the free throw line a ton. He ends up on the floor like 15 times a game. You might be getting a player that has 1 to 2 good years of basketball left in them. And if in those 1 to 2 years you're a championship contender and him and Joel Embiid are doing their thing, that's fine. But there's absolutely no guarantee that just because you put James Harden back with Daryl Morey, that suddenly you have Houston James Harden again, because I'm not sure that guy still exists. And by the way, I'm also not sure that the Nets wouldn't be mildly excited about swapping Harden for Simmons. He might be a better fit with that Brooklyn team. You might be increasing your competition level within your own conference by trading Simmons for Harden, which appears to be the main focus at the moment. And so at the end of the day, it's a wildly complicated situation. There's no doubt about that. It's a situation that Simmons put the Sixers in the first place. If he had just decided to stick with the team, and maybe they did end up moving him, maybe they do make that realization that it just doesn't work, but at least it would have been easier to move him without him requesting a trade, without him quitting on the team, without him deciding not to play basketball this year because of what that did to his trade value. And so I don't want to be confusing here about where the blame is placed. It's absolutely on Ben Simmons for creating the situation in the first place, but I really question the way that Philadelphia has handled it every step of the way. They could have had a Simmons trade 6 months ago, if they were a little bit more proactive about it, if they were a little bit more on top of this idea that his value is going to decrease and Embiid is going to be awesome. And if he's healthy and you put someone else alongside him in place of Simmons, with all the other pieces you have on this roster, you have a legitimate championship contender, a team that can make the finals. And if you don't move Simmons, you're simply throwing that away, which could prove to be a massive, massive misstep on the part of Daryl Morey and the Sixers front office.